Have you guys ever had a family meeting? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you walk into your house and you walk into the living room and the air kind of shifts and there's a sign, maybe it says intervention above the living room floor. Like, and you're just like, man, like, what is happening? And your parents, your mom and dad, they're like, hey, we want you to sit down because we need to have a conversation. And so you sit down and you start to realize that they're trying to address something that you did, something that happened, and you're just like, man, like, what is going on? And sometimes you puff up and you get angry and you get frustrated. Sometimes you lash out. Sometimes you withdraw. Sometimes we do all these different things. I remember I was a part of a family meeting with my dad. Except this family meeting looked a little different because this family meeting was over email, which is how you know it was really bad. Right? Like, he was like, hey, Josh, we need to talk. And I was like, all right, Dad, like what do we need to talk about? And we kind of talked back and forth. And we got to this point where that year, he said, hey, I don't want you to come home for Christmas. Like, that was the result of my family meeting. And you know what the worst part is? I deserved it. Like, he wasn't wrong in that decision. In fact, that decision was led by my behavior. And so family meetings, like, sometimes we have these conversations, these hard conversations with our family, and we're just like, man, this hurts, this is painful, this is tough. Sometimes you got siblings who are absolutely driving you mad. Those of you who have siblings are like, yes, often. The younger siblings are like, yes, I do it all the time. Right, because in family, like, we've got these dynamics where it's frustrating, where it's hard, where sometimes we get off track from where we were meant to be. And I want us together tonight and really throughout this series, I want to give us a chance for you and me and all of us to have a family meeting. And I want us to sit down and I want us to be able to have a conversation about, hey, like, how are we doing? Like, what's the health of our family like right now? Like, what is going on in our world? Because a family meeting isn't about just like correcting a behavior. A family meeting isn't just about telling you you're wrong all the time. It's not about making you feel bad. Let me tell you what it's about. A family meeting is about getting your family to where it was always meant to be. It's about taking that family and making it a community. It's about taking that family and making it missional and driving towards the feet of Jesus. And so tonight's your health check. Like, tonight's the health check where we get to investigate our own hearts as we press into what it looks like to be the family, and not just the family, y'all, the family member, because you directly impact the environments you live in. Now, hear me in this before I dive too far into this. Like, some of you are coming from incredible hurt from your family. I'm not saying what they did to you or around you is okay. I'm not justifying it. What I'm asking you is, what is your part right now? How can you be the son or daughter or brother or sister that Jesus has created and called you to be? So we're going to go ahead, and I want to invite you to open up to Genesis chapter 4. I love it. I think we're getting worse at that. I'll try it again. I want to invite you to open up to Genesis chapter 4. And if you're new here and you're like, hey, why do they do that? We get excited about getting into Scripture. Like, that's something that pumps me up, as I want us, as we open the Word, for us to get excited. As you turn to Genesis chapter 4, I'm Josh. I'm the director of Next Gen Ministries here at SciLife. And I'm pumped about this new series, because this series is an opportunity for not just you, but my hope is that your parents, that they're tuning in online, my hope is that you guys are actually, you're going to have some strategies and some homework for you to do at home, where I want you guys, each week, you're going to sit down and have a family meeting. And it's going to give you a chance to speak into how your parents parent you, which should be exciting. And it's also going to give your parents a chance to lead and shepherd you well as well. So we're going to just go ahead and dive right in verse 1. It says, Adam made love to his wife Eve. Everybody be cool. It happens. It's fine. And she became pregnant, which is what happens, and then gave birth to Cain. She said, with the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man. Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now, Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. So, you got the sheep, the goats, all that's Abel. Like, Abel's got the living, like, moving creatures, and then Cain is working the soil. So he's got the crops and the fruit in the fields. And so they've got these two distinguished roles, but both are equally good. It says, in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. So now remember, before Jesus came, there were these offerings that were presented to the Lord, right? And sometimes it was crops, sometimes it was creatures. But there were these offerings where we were supposed to give the best that we had and present it to God. Now, we don't do those offerings today. Those offerings, well, we do, they just look a little different, right? These offerings are giving our full heart. Like these offerings look like giving God our schedule, look like giving God our finances, look like giving God our security, giving God open hands to follow him wherever he calls. So they give these offerings, and it says, the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering, he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. So we see right here in this passage that we're about to read, we see 3 different family meetings, 3 different hard conversations that God has with Cain. And there are these meetings where God's like, hey, there's an issue here, and we're going to address it because I'm not going to let you keep straying. I love you too much. And so right here, we see this moment where God looks on Cain's offering and says, hold on, you're missing it. Like, hold on, you're missing the mark here. Some of you might be like, well, I don't get it. Because you've got Abel giving his flock. You've got Cain giving his fruit. What's the issue? Here's the issue. Remember, God wants your best. And Cain, he didn't offer his best. In fact, he kept his best for himself. And he offered an offering that wasn't very good. He gave God the leftovers. Let me tell you something about God. God is not a leftover God. Like, we don't give offering, like, you don't pull the stale meatloaf from your fridge. Side note, if you eat meatloaf at all, that's disgusting. But if you pull the stale meatloaf from your fridge, you don't offer that to a friend, right? Yes, you do. You're like, I got to get rid of that. That thing's nasty. No, listen. God is not a God of leftovers. Like, he's not someone that we give our second best or our third best or just that thing on the side or that thing that's been moldy in the fridge. No. We give God our very best. And God's saying, hey, let's have a meeting. Because you're missing the mark and you're not giving me the best that you have. God has a conversation. And this is so important because when we're having a health check, when we're talking about our family, which is what we're talking about tonight, when we talk about our family meeting, I want you to investigate what's the health of my family? Like, how are we doing? Here's a great test. When brought conflict or correction or change, how do you respond? Like, what do you do? Because I think often it's like, hey, like, listen, there's this one thing that you're doing. Like, I wish that you would just like, hey, be more engaged with the family. Like, stop hanging out in your room all the time. Or, hey, I wish that, like, at dinner, maybe you led prayer. Like, I want you to be bold in that. And so you've got these asks, and all of a sudden, we get frustrated when someone gives us an ask. We get frustrated when we get corrected. We get angry. And so we see it right here. We see, so Cain. Right? So Cain, because he didn't get his way, because God did not look on his stale meatloaf offering, he didn't look on it with joy and favor, so Cain became not just angry, he became very angry. In fact, he was downcast. So here's what we got to remember, guys. When we get angry, that's not a sin. It's actually not. Like, anger is not a sin, but what it does do is it creates a lot of room for us to sin. And it's a risk, and we get in this rebellious mode, right, where it's like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and address this issue in the way that I want. And so we yell at our parents, or we bully our sibling, or we give them the cold shoulder and we just don't talk to them for weeks. We do whatever we can to feel like we're getting back on that hurt that they created in our hearts. Here's the deal with rebellion, y'all. Your rebellion reveals your own immaturity. Now, I'm not saying that for all rebellions. Like, some rebellions are incredibly justified and biblically based. But listen, when it comes to family, so often our rebellion is revealing of our own immaturity. And you say, yeah, well, like, you don't get it, Josh. Like, you don't get it because my parents, they're rude to me sometimes. Or my parents, they don't understand me, they don't get me. Or my sibling, they're just annoying. Like, if you were with my sister, you get it. She's annoying. So I hear you. But we need to recognize that at some point, they don't control your part. Like at some point, you control your part, and we need to investigate our own hearts. Like we need to recognize that what goes on in here overflows into everything around us. And if my heart is hardened and cold and frustrated and angered towards a family member, I need to address it, because if not, that is a foothold for sin in my life, and it's going to be leading to stumbling for my family in the future. So God has this conversation with Cain. He says, hey, we're going to have a heart check. We're going to have a health check on your heart. Verse 6, it continues. It says, then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? He's like, I'm going to just address this thing. Like, okay, I see you're mad. Help me understand why you're mad. Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. See, God's not done. God's like, hey, I see that you're mad. And there's a foothold on your heart right now. And sin, what it wants to do is it wants to have you. It wants to take you. It wants to lead you into doing things that you shouldn't do. And so you can either be taken by it or you can rule over it, but you can't do both. So how do you respond? Like when you have a family meeting and you sit down and your parents share something that you don't want to hear. When your brother or your sister, they say, hey, I don't like it when you say that, or I don't like it when you act that way. Or when your parents say, hey, when you do those things, I want you to know there's younger eyes, they're watching you. Please lead them well. How do you respond? And what do you do? Because sin is either going to take over or you're going to rule over it. And the only way to rule over sin is to walk next to the king. That's the only way. The only way to rule over sin is to have a relationship with the one who can tell that sin to go in the grave. It's to walk side by side with Jesus. So here's the reality. When I talk about how do you respond, this message isn't just for you. That's just the reality of it. Like this message is actually for every single person in this room, every parent in your home, every sibling that is not here but should be here. The ones that are younger and too young to make, like this is for everybody. But here's my challenge. I don't want you to sit down and be like, I wish my mom was listening to this message. She'd learn a lot. Right? Like, or I wish dad was here, or I wish that my younger brother, or whatever. Like, this message is for you. I want you to focus on your part. My hope is as we dive into this series, that every single person in your family will investigate their own hearts, check the alignment of their own homes, and make sure they're on a path that's headed closer to the king. Like, that's the hope. But it starts not with them. Right now, it's going to start with you. See, one of the best ways for you to identify your level of maturity. So when I say level of maturity, what I'm talking about is spiritual maturity. I'm talking about walking beside Jesus. And one of the best ways to identify your level of spiritual maturity is to understand how you handle anger. How do you respond? How do you respond when somebody corrects you or a family meeting happens, when it gets addressed, when you're frustrated? What do you do with it? Because God gave Cain two options. He said, hey, you can get righteous or you can get angry. He said, hey, God, like you can do two things. You can do this or you can do that. You can do sin or you can be ruled over sin. He says you got two options, righteous or sinful. Now you can choose. So in verse 8 it says, now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. All right, they're going to go hang out. This is pretty cool. I'm in. Like they're starting to address it. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. All right. That's good. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? I don't know, he replied. Am I my brother's keeper? The Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. And just like that, Cain's unhealth is revealed to the max. Right, like he allowed his anger, he had a choice, his anger drove him into doing this terrible sin. Now here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you are going to murder your sibling. But they drive you nuts. Right? Like there's a moment where, man, I could just kill him. Like I just strangle him. Right? Like there are these moments where we're so frustrated and angry that we lash out. And no, it's probably not murder. And if you're close to that point, please have a conversation with your leader. We would love to talk through that with you. But most of you, it's going to look different. Most of you, it's going to look like a fist fight. Most of you, it's going to look like not talking for a long period of time. Most of you, it's going to look like not trusting them ever again. Most of you, it's going to look like, hey, when I'm out of this house, I'm free of them, I'm liberated. And so rather than trying to address the hurt, address the problem, address the anger and the frustration, we just avoid it. God's saying, hey, you got two options. Like Cain chose one. Cain chose that his anger was going to drive his behavior. Cain said, hey, I'm so frustrated that I'm going to lash out. But I'm going to challenge you. And this is, hear me in this, this is one of the biggest challenges that you're ever going to face because it is so hard to do. But their unfaithfulness is not an excuse for you to be unfaithful. I'll say it again. Their unfaithfulness is not an excuse for you to be unfaithful. And here's the beauty in that, because if that were the heart of God, you and I would be going straight to hell. I'm saying it. Because I am unfaithful as a follower of Christ every time I sin, every time I make a mistake, every time I stray from his presence. And if God said, you were unfaithful, therefore I can be unfaithful, I'd be toast. But that's not what he says. God says, no. Your unfaithfulness does not define me. Your unfaithfulness does not say that I won't love you anymore. Your unfaithfulness does not mean that you stray, therefore I withdraw too. God says, no. I am who I am. You can't change me. And here's the challenge. Be who God created you to be. Like, who did God create you to be in your family? I can tell you who he didn't create you to be. Unfaithful, withdrawn, lashing out, angry, bitter. And again, I can't reiterate this enough, that when I'm sharing these family conversations, if you have a significant family trauma, or maybe there's something ongoing right now, where there's a family member that's causing you significant hurt, I'm not telling you to try to work it out with them. I'm telling you, hey, if it is significant, where you're being actually hurt, you need to tell a leader so we can walk beside you. We don't want you to have to walk that out alone. But if we're talking about everyday conflict, if we're talking about just getting our hearts right for each other, listen, that's a responsibility that every single one of us have. My challenge to you is to not wait on your parents to do it. See, some of you got parents who have incredible hearts, and some of you have parents that are struggling too, because we're all struggling. I get that. But the challenge is their faithfulness or unfaithfulness is not tied to who God calls you to be, and so be faithful anyway. Like, you're called to be a disciple of Christ. And so my challenge and my commission is be that. Be everything God's created you to be in your family. I'm going to go ahead and pray, and then I've got some homework for you. Jesus, we love you so much. Thank you for your heart for us. Thank you for the way that you pursue us and walk beside us. God, you are good, and you are strong, and you are mighty and loving. And God, we just give you all the glory and the praise in your name. Amen. So I've got some quick homework, and then I'm going to send you to your small groups. Your small groups are going to talk about it too. But I want to challenge you every week. I'm sending this out to your parents too. Hey, guys. Hey, this group right here, could you stay after the message? We've got some homework, and I want you guys to really press in and take this seriously. So you're going to have a chance to meet with your family. I'm sending this out to your parents. And you're going to do something called a stop, start, continue. Stop, start, continue. And here's what that looks like. You're going to sit down, and you're going to say, hey, here's one thing that you're doing that I'm asking you to stop doing. And that's with the heart of like the betterment of family or getting closer to Jesus. So it could be like, hey, when I ask you, this could be from your parents, they could say, hey, when I ask you to do your chores and you say, fat chance, chump, could you stop saying that and maybe do your chores? Like that's fair. That's a fair request, right? That's the stop. Start. Maybe your parents are like, hey, you spend all day playing video games in your room and we never see you. We would love to start seeing you around the house more. That's fair. Continue. That's something that you're crushing that they want to celebrate. Like, hey, when we are like together and having dinner and like you're telling like some of the jokes and stories about what happened at school, we love that. Keep doing that. That's so fun. And you're going to have a chance to get to do that with your parents too. So you're going to give them a stop, start, continue. Because you're going to get to speak into how you want to be led.